Alrighty, so for our next presenter will be Saba here, which will be presenting your cyber defense game, a game changer in MITRE D3FEND, and how to master it, which sounds very interesting. And I'll leave it there and let her take it away, and off you go.
Okay, no, that's okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone, and hope you enjoy the conference so far. So today's presentation, I want to talk about MITRE D3FEND framework. Probably, it's just for my own knowledge. Is there anyone in the room that in their organization has started implementing this framework? Okay. Okay. So basically, I just want to talk about this framework today because it's a kind of new framework, and it would help organization to structure their defenses. But before I actually explain about this framework, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Saba Bagheri, and I'm actually, it's been now 15 years that I'm working in the industry as a whole. I used to work in software development and design, and then had a career transition into cybersecurity. I started my role as a cybersecurity researcher, but then was involving in different projects, working as a consultant in cyber threat intelligence, risk management, did some security architecture work. And at the moment, I'm working for one of the government department in New South Wales. And in terms of my educational background, I have a PhD on cybersecurity resilience and a few number of certification. Okay, before I actually start specifically talking about MITRE D3FEND framework, I want to share a story about an incident that happened a few years ago. Because I just believe that it is very important for us as cyber professional or those who are new in the industry or a student thinking about coming to cybersecurity field. It is important to highlight the importance of having a good understanding of attackers' behavior and then apply a structured approach to deal with those behavior. So back in May 2021, there was a large fuel pipeline in United States called Colonial Pipeline. They experienced a massive ransomware attack. And the group that targeted them was called DarkSide, and they were able to gain initial access to that environment using combination of phishing and exploiting vulnerabilities, vulnerability exploitation method. And as a result of that, they once they gained access to their system, they deployed ransomware, they encrypt sensitive data, and the whole operation shut down. So as a result of that attack, part of United States, coast east of the United States, they experienced shortage in terms of the fuel consumption, and panic buying started. And so the company faced a very tough situation. They wanted to make decision, should they pay ransomware group because they wanted to wait the cost of cut down against the ransomware payment, which during that time was around $4.4 million. At the end, the company decided to pay the ransomware group because they had to regain access to their infrastructure. That incident during that time raised a big question about companies' cybersecurity measures and readiness to deal with these types of ransomware attack. And specifically, this attack shows how it is challenging for organizations these days when they want to deal with a ransomware attack, because it is important for organizations to have a structured approach in defense using frameworks like attack or defend, which I'm going to talk during this presentation today. What this talk covers, I want to talk about MITRE DFEND, but before I talk about MITRE DFEND, I have to first explain about MITRE ATT&CK. You may wonder why I need to explain about MITRE ATT&CK as well. The answer is that in cybersecurity, we cannot talk about defense before we know what we are defending against. MITRE ATT&CK is the how and what of attackers. And that's why I first talk about attack, then talk about defend, and we'll give you an example of a few use cases that we can use to effectively use this framework. Okay, MITRE ATT&CK basically help us to know the bad guys. And it's like a trusty GPS that can help us navigate through complicated threat landscape. And it's actually like a guidebook, including all information about attackers' behavior. And imagine that you are a detective and you are working on a very complicated case. You have a couple of clues about past crimes. When you put together these clues, you can, actually predict based on past crime that what might be that criminal group and what might they do next. And this is exactly how MITRE ATT&CK can help us, because it shows us information about attackers' behavior and what they might do next, and how we can basically understand their behavior in our environment. So MITRE ATT&CK, based on the definition, is a documented collection of information about malicious behaviors, advanced persistent threat group, or ransomware operators have shown in the real world incident or the real world attack. It's a globally recognized framework. ATT&CK stands for adversary's tactic, technique, and common knowledge. If you go through the MITRE ATT&CK website, you will see this framework, which at the top of the framework, you can see different attackers' tactic. At the moment, we have 14 tactics. And below each tactic, you can see the list of techniques. What is tactic and technique in MITRE ATT&CK framework? So the tactic basically talks about the high-level goals attackers try to achieve. Imagine that attacker wants to gain initial access to your environment, or they already have access to your environment. They want to privilege their escalation. And technique, so each tactic has a couple of techniques. Techniques is the method being used by attacker to achieve that tactic. And below each technique, there are a couple of sub-techniques, which sub-techniques is more detailed implementation or information about each technique. So basically in MITRE ATT&CK website, you can search different group of advanced persistent threats or ransomware operator. And when you search that group, you will be shown the list of tactic or technique being used by these groups. For example, imagine Volt Typhoon. Volt Typhoon is a Chinese advanced persistent threat groups, and it is known for its cyber espionage activities, and it is usually used combination of tactic, technique, and sub-technique. And specifically, this group is interested in targeting critical infrastructure and also government department, particularly in Australia. And one of the tactics of this group is called credential access based on MITRE ATT&CK. And credential access is talking about the method attackers using to access the username, password, or API keys of systems or users. And if you go through MITRE ATT&CK website and search for credential access that highlighted there, you can see there are different techniques under credential access. So one of the techniques being used by this group is called brute forcing. So brute forcing is basically a method that attackers use to guess passwords of the user. And each technique, as I did mention, has some sub-techniques, and this group particularly use credential stuffing sub-technique from brute force technique. And credential stuffing is the method attackers using stolen credentials, legitimate credential from past incidents to try to access different users' platform, the platform that's being used by the users, because lots of users basically use the same, password to access different platforms. And this is basically how MITRE ATT&CK can help us understand attackers' tactic and technique. So far I explained about MITRE ATT&CK and how it can be used as a guideline for us to understand attackers' behavior. Now that we understand the attacker's behavior, then it's the time for us to know how we should defend against those behaviors. So let's talk about MITRE D3FEND. So MITRE D3FEND is like a cybersecurity toolkit. It's like a knowledge, gathered in a framework format, in a model format about what we should do as a cyber defender. And DEFEND stands for Detection, Denial, and Disruption Framework, empowering network defense. And the aim of this matrix is standardize the language we use when we talk about effective cyber strategy, and its aim to make cybersecurity clearer and more efficient, and also provide some actionable items for defenders. And when actually these two frameworks, MITRE ATT&CK and MITRE D3FEND frameworks, they complement each other. Because when you look at the privilege escalation in MITRE ATT&CK, you can find defensive countermeasures for privilege privilege restriction in DEFEND matrix. Before I further explain about MITRE D3FEND, I need to just highlight a few points about this specific framework. So MITRE D3FEND is a framework that is a great framework, can help us identify the list of defensive techniques. But the reality is that this framework doesn't give us guidance on how or which technique we should prioritize in our environment. It is our responsibility, based on our own environment, to make decision which one we should pick up. Also, MITRE D3FEND is a maturing research project, and its developers, its creators are still adding defense action item into it. But it's mature enough, it is stable enough that you can use it to structure your defenses as a model to guide your defenses. So how to use MITRE D3FEND framework? So basically, the first thing that you need to do is going through the defendmitre.org website. And when you go there, you see the D3FEND navigator. And in this navigator, you can see the list of D3FEND tactic at the top and D3FEND techniques below each D3FEND tactic. And it is, a little bit similar in terms of the structure that they have, similar to MITRE ATT&CK framework. But obviously, this framework is just talking about defense actions. And we have at the moment 7 defense tactic in this framework, despite MITRE ATT&CK, which has 14 attack tactic. We have model, which basically talk about what we want to defend against. For example, when it's talking about if you have your asset inventory or you have your software inventory, hardening is talking about the list of defenses to harden your application. It is before an attack happens, and it's more around, before you go, you actually go your system live. And also detection is the list of tactic, which is talking about detecting a malicious behavior. Isolation is tactic to talk about, how you isolate your system once an attacker is there. Deception, list of deceptive techniques. For example, you want to lure attackers or mislead them to guide them to an observed environment like a honeypot. Evict is when you want to remove attacker from your environment, and restore when you want to restore it back. Restore your system back to the normal operation. So D3FEND Matrix is an interactive tool. So it means that at the left side of this matrix, there is a section called attack lookup. If you go to attack lookup, search for a specific attack technique, you will be shown the list of defensive actions or recommendation for that particular technique. And at the right part of the framework, you will see D3FEND lookup. It means that if you search for a specific defensive technique, you will be shown list of, further or detailed countermeasure or information about that particular technique. Let's go through one example together to see how we should basically use this matrix. Okay, imagine that, imagine a company has a great CISO. The CISO is always trying to stay vigilant about the latest threat trend. And the CISO recently read something about attackers using a particular technique called valid account. So the CISO became very worried, reached out to cyber team. Hey, cyber team, what should we do? So imagine that you are part of that cyber team and you actually got trained about MITRE D3FEND just recently. So the first thing that you need to do is, obviously, if you do not know what valid account means, you need to go through the MITRE ATT&CK website, the best place, and find out information about valid accounts. So basically, valid accounts refers to the methods attackers using a valid credential they already obtained through past incident or past data breaches, and they use it for other attacks. When you actually understand exactly about valid accounts, the next thing is to understand what defensive countermeasures are there. So you go through MITRE D3FEND. In the attack lookup, you type valid accounts. And then you will be shown with the list of defensive action or defensive recommendation. And usually in MITRE D3FEND, you find many defensive recommendations because you're following defense in-depth, principle and framework. But I just picked up two of them to explain about each of them separately: account locking and multi-factor authentication. So account locking, imagine that you click on account locking. Basically, MITRE D3FEND framework gives a specific code for each defense item and define that defense item and explain about how it works and the considerations about that particular item. For example, in that case, account locking is the process of temporarily disabling user access to its account based on the observed malicious activity. And the next one is multi-factor authentication. The same scenario, if you click on that one, you will be shown a code for that particular item with further explanation. And this is how you can use MITRE D3FEND. You actually use the list of recommendations, send it to the CISO, and then that's the CISO that needs to make that decision if they want to implement it or not. So far I explained about MITRE ATT&CK, MITRE D3FEND, and yeah, MITRE D3FEND is really great and it can help us a lot. But the reality is that we live in a world that the threat landscape is constantly changing, constantly evolving. We are dealing with sophisticated advanced persistent group or ransomware operator, and some of them are being funded by other countries, and it's really, really hard for us to keep up with their tactics and techniques. We cannot actually, go through each of these groups' techniques and tactics in MITRE ATT&CK, then find defensive actions in MITRE D3FEND and try to implement them. It is really not possible. Another thing is that the budget is very limited for cybersecurity, and the time is also limited. So what the solution is? So the solution lies in looking at all these challenging environments from threat intelligence perspective. And by that, I mean that you first need to understand what threat landscape is really applicable to your environment. For example, if you actually work in a financial organization, you may actually find yourself being targeted or being concerned by a different group of threat actors. Whereas if you work in a government corporation or government department, based on the data that you store, you may actually see different groups of threat actors who are interested to target your organization. So the first thing is that you need to understand your enemies. You need to understand who may be thinking about targeting you. And the next thing is you need to, after you understand your enemies, you need to find a way to understand what attack technique from these enemies are commonly being used. Because you cannot obviously just, pick up all those techniques by these groups. And then you should actually, based on those common behavior, you should prioritize your defenses and then implement targeted defense measures. Let's go through another use case together. This is a fictional story. Lately, we have been hearing a lot about Saba and ransomware groups causing trouble for Australian companies. Our CISO is in a hurry and asked a threat intel team to figure out how we can stop these guys as soon as possible. The tricky part, we don't have a big budget for fancy tools, so we will need to get clever and find a smart, low-cost ways to protect ourselves. Okay, we don't have budget, which is very common in all organizations for the cyber team. And whatever recommendation we need to provide to the CISO with, we should be, in a hurry, and it should be done as soon as possible. The time is limited. So the first thing that you can do is knowing these two guys. Who are these two ransomware groups? Okay, look at each of them. Resida. So Resida ransomware group is a group that has emerged in April 2023. And this group is known for using a sophisticated and combination of different tactic and technique, and it's targeting different organizations across the world. And one of its recent attack was an attack on Access Health System, which as a result of that attack, the group requested $1.5 million from the victim. I did some research about this group's techniques. So this is a snapshot of the MITRE ATT&CK website. So I put the techniques which is being used by this group of ransomware, operator. I put them in yellow. So these are the techniques being used by this group. Let's go through the next one, Ransom Hub. Okay, Ransom Hub is a slightly newer ransomware group, and it has emerged early this year, and is specifically known for using ransomware as a service, kind of model, and also targeting all different types of industry across the world. And since February 2024, it was responsible for attacking more than 200 organizations across the world. And so what I did, I spent some time, again, I found out the list of techniques being used by this group. And so the areas in green shows the techniques which being used by this group. So now we have each of these group techniques, attack techniques. And we cannot actually go through each of these techniques and try to find out the way to stop them or mitigate the risk of these attack technique. So what we need to do is we need to understand which of these techniques being commonly used by both groups. So for that purpose, I merged these two matrices, and you see there are two different cells highlighted in red, which shows the techniques commonly the techniques commonly being used by both groups. So our defense mechanism, because our time is limited and we must prioritize our defensive actions, our defense mechanism should focus on these two. So the two of these techniques are exploit public-facing application, which in that technique, attackers target public-facing or internet-facing infrastructure of the victims, find out the vulnerabilities there. And another technique is command and scripting interpreter, where attackers uses command line interfaces or other scripting languages to run, to do malicious activities. And so your defensive, actions should focus on these two. For exploit public facing application, usually you need to find out what, in the different reports of threat intelligence, what specific vulnerabilities have been reported, which is specifically, exploited by these two groups, and then find out if any of your environment you have something that is impacted by that vulnerability and you need to apply patches. And the next one, command and scripting interpreter. This is a specific technique of attacker. If you go through the MITRE D3FEND website, there are lots of defensive recommendations. I just picked up two of them. File integrity monitoring, you can actually put recommendation about this particular defensive actions, and also local file permission. For example, you can actually restrict, the access of running a script by different users. Key takeaways. So in this presentation, I try to explain about how we can set up a strong defense strategies. And there are three main points that I want to highlight. The first thing is, the first step actually is to understand your enemies, who may target your organization. And then you need to understand their behaviors, the technique and tactic that they are using, which the best place to identify these behaviors is MITRE ATT&CK website. The next one is based on the observed behavior of attackers, you need to put together a list of a structured defense. And you can use MITRE D3FEND because it gives you a structured approach to model your defense. And the last one is making sure that you prioritize your defensive based on the specific threat landscape that you have. And I would like to actually finish off my presentation by a quote from Stephen Napu. It takes only 20 years to build a reputation and just a few minutes of cyber incident to ruin it. So let's ensure that these few minutes are met with a strong cyber strategies. And if you have any question.
Thanks for the sharing. Do you see any difference between the MITRE defense and anti-cyber defense framework?
Sorry, what principle?
The difference between the MITRE defense and anti-cyber defense framework.
Cyber defense.
Cyber defense.
About that, sorry. Yeah. But it should be different because it's a very, because I'm not sure about that framework, but defense framework is exactly mapping between MITRE ATT&CK behavior and then the countermeasures for that specific behavior. I'm not sure if that's if that's the same. I don't think that it should be. Yeah, attackers' behavior.
But the active cyber defense framework does they have more activities like threat intelligence, threat hunting, and honeypot or something else like that. And so that means it's more approach than the.
Okay.
It's very limited for MITRE defense.
Okay. That's good to know.
Hi, Saba. It's a really great talk. I've got a question about mitigations. In the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you have mitigations against attack techniques. Is there a commonality between those and defend, or is one inherited from the other, or part of the other?
So your question is about the list of mitigation and detection that we have already in MITRE ATT&CK framework. Your question, okay, it's a very good question. I'm happy that you asked that question. So those detection and mitigation in MITRE ATT&CK framework is very general. It's a high-level guideline about what you need to do. But MITRE DFEND is going very deep, a very granular level of information, very technical guideline about how you should implement those stuff. And also it even consider, for example, how you stop false positive alerts, what consideration need to be there. It's very technical, detailed information, which is different from that high-level guideline in MITRE ATT&CK. But that's a very good question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the talk. Excellent.
You.
Inside the DFEND framework, I was really happy to see that there was stuff about recovery, isolation, beyond just when we traditionally think of protection.
Yeah.
From your perspective, how can we extend from attack to defend into like the NIST cybersecurity framework so that we see the entire life cycle from, protection into detection, response, and recovery? Does DFEND cover that, and how does that map?
Sorry, you're asking about NIST framework, right?
The NIST CSF.
Yes.
Yeah, as an extension from the MITRE work.
Okay, so that's a very good question again. Thanks for that. So they actually, in their blog, they published a mapping between NIST control item to MITRE DFEND framework. I can show you in the website if you want after this presentation. Exactly, they actually map it. Specifically map it between protect and, if I'm not mistaken, detect part of the NIST framework.
Awesome.
Any other question? Going once? Going twice.
All right. Thank you, Saba, for that. This is from B-Sides Camera. It's a little present for you there. It's very succinct talk about for defenders. All right. That's the bit of a lunch break now until 1:30, and I'll see you all back in here then if you want to see the next talk. Thank you.